Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Freely Nourished, the podcast that empowers you to break the cycle of dieting by teaching you to nourish your body well. I am your host, registered dietitian Erin Casey, and I am the owner of New You Nutrition Counseling, where we believe that you can achieve your health goals at any body size, and you can also do it including all of your favorite foods. So, if you are ready to break free from the vicious cycle of dieting and restriction, and exercise as punishment, give us a look at our website below and see what good nutrition can do for you. And today I have a fun topic for you all. I feel like I've talked about this a little bit in various pieces of my other episodes, but it's something I get questions about a lot. So I actually thought it might make the most sense to just kind of do a podcast episode about just about that. So the topic is supplements. So I get lots of questions, as I'm sure you guys can imagine, about various supplements. A lot of times, supplements that are like explicitly designed for a purpose. So, for example, things like hydroxycut or whatever for weight loss, but also things that people have heard for disease management. So, for example, cinnamon supplements to help with diabetes, turmeric for inflammation, and things like that. And to be honest with you, I am happy to do an episode where I kind of go through like a lot of like myths and facts. But to be honest with you, I need to know from you all what it is that you have heard and what it is that you want confirmation on. So this episode will not be that. I'll be flat out with that. This is not about specific, supplements and whether or not they're effective to treat certain diseases. I did do an episode on apple cider vinegar a couple of weeks ago. I'll link that one below because that's definitely something I get questions about quite frequently. But if you have questions about like specific supplements, I would love to compile them into another episode. So please leave me a comment below and let me know kind of what questions you have in terms of, various supplements, whether they are things like, the Go Low supplements or, I'm trying to think. I feel like there was another weight loss one that just came out, or things like cinnamon for diabetes, or turmeric for joint pain, and things like that. Whatever it is, let me know what you've heard. I promise you, I've probably been asked it before. I just, it's one of those things that those things aren't always at the top of my mind. So let me know what it is that you've heard, and I promise you, there's no stupid question. So let them fly. Today, what I wanted to spend a little bit more time focusing on is just kind of in general what supplements are and what they need to have in order to make health claims, how they're regulated, things like that. And this really applies to everything we've talked about, right? So everything from like Go Low and hydroxycut, but also things like vitamin C, vitamin D, et cetera, and whatnot. So really anything that is considered a supplement. Kind of fits into this general label, and basically everything I'm going to talk about from here on out in the episode is going to apply to all of those things. First of all, supplements, what are they? Right, so supplements are they are nutrients. So they are pieces of food, but they are not food products. So I think it's important to kind of recognize that they are components of food. So things like, for example, vitamin D, right? Like you don't just go out into nature and find vitamin D, just like, ergocalciferol is the chemical name for it. You don't just find that just kind of like hanging around, right? It's nestled in with other foods. So things like fatty fish, milk, cheese, eggs, etc. Those foods also have things like proteins and fats and other micronutrients such as calcium or what have you, as well. But basically when you have a supplement, it is an isolated component. Sometimes it is multiple components, right? So like you can have like a vitamin D and zinc tablet, for example, or things like hydroxycut, which are various typically plant extracts and things of that nature. Sometimes they are isolated micronutrients, sometimes they're just like I don't know, ashwagandha extract or something like that. But basically they are components of food. They are not whole foods. So they are things that are found in foods, but they're not whole foods. But they are also not medicines. So medicines are typically, while they can include various parts of plants extracts, and actually a lot of them do, I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize about medicine and pharmacology is that honestly a lot of things that we take now are what are called natural products, and which means that they're derived from plants. It is not a nutrient part of a plant, so it's not something that your body can use to nourish itself, but it is a part of a plant that does bind to a receptor in your body somewhere that adjusts signaling somehow and in some way mitigates a disease. So I think one of the most common medications I actually heard recently is, for example, metformin, right? So metformin is a synthetic compound, but it was derived from a lilac. So I think it's just kind of important to think about that. People think these things are poisons sometimes. They're actually not. To an extent, yeah, the pharmaceutical industry can definitely go too far. Don't get me wrong. That said, these things, like, they're synthetic compounds, but they're synthetic because they were originally derived from some sort of plant, usually, and then we found a synthetic way to make it without having to blow through copious amounts of the plant, right? So that's what it means. It just means that we've taken fancy chemistry and created the same molecule without having to go through a stripping process of deriving it from a plant. That said, supplements don't do that, right? So supplements are taking it directly from usually a plant, or a food source for that matter. So supplements are taking it directly from the food source. They are not synthesizing anything, or at least they are not supposed to. And what the context there is that because these things are neither food nor medication, they do not fall under the jurisdiction of the FDA. So the FDA is the Food and Drug Administration. They monitor and regulate all of our food products. And when I say food products, it is typically packaged food products. So things like produce and meat and fish and poultry, all of that is regulated typically by the USDA. But things like, crackers, pasta, cereal, anything that kind of comes in a package, that is regulated by the FDA. And the way that you can tell the difference is if there has a nutrition facts label on it. That usually means that there's an it's a FDA regulated product. The FDA also regulates, so it's food and drug, right? So they regulate food, but they also regulate medications. So things like metformin, all prescription drugs, but also over the counter drugs. So things like Advil, Pepto-Bismol, stuff like that. All of that is regulated by the FDA because all of that contains synthetic compounds. So kind of, to back it up, why that is when we started kind of introducing more processed food into the American diet, basically we had things that people didn't, for example, I'm just going to use crackers as an example. I didn't make these crackers myself, so I don't know exactly what is in them. I know the way that I make crackers is with, wheat flour, but like somebody else may use corn flour, or, I don't know what this company used. So if I have an allergy to one of the components they use, then it could be dangerous for me to consume that product. So it started with just ingredient labeling, that there weren't, there's no rules of like things you can and cannot include outside of, illicit substances. But basically you just have to label it. You just have to claim what it is, and then that eventually evolved into the nutrition facts label, which has to include all of your macronutrients, so calories, protein, fat, carbohydrates, etc., and then a few kind of key micronutrients such as like vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, etc. And that really just came from a public health push, so that American consumers could be more aware of what they were consuming, right? Because it's kind of, not all crackers have the same calorie content. Not all crackers have the same fat content. They're usually pretty similar, but they're not the same. And kind of the argument was the public has a right to know what they're consuming, and they're right. So the FDA makes people put, or makes food companies rather put nutrition facts labels on their on their product. So it has to include all the nutrition facts, and then it also has to include the ingredients. That said, I think it is really important to recognize that those are the only two labels on any food product that are regulated. So when you look at something and it's, a box of cereal and it says lowers cholesterol or may help lower cholesterol, that is probably just advertising the fiber content. At the same time, I guarantee you that cereal company has never done a single clinical study to show that their oats help lower cholesterol. Promise you dollars to donuts, that has never happened. Right. They just know that there's soluble fiber in their cereal product. There is evidence that soluble fiber helps to lower cholesterol. So they decided to make that health claim and stick it on the front of their package, which is the part that you actually see, and nobody can do anything about it to stop them. So I think that's really important to recognize. Another one that I kind of find almost comical is that I see, gluten-free labeled pretty much everywhere, which is fine if it's, pasta or crackers or bread or something that would normally contain gluten. Yeah, it makes sense to label it gluten-free if it is. Where it gets really funny is things like bacon. Like bacon obviously is gluten-free because, like, why would bacon ever contain gluten in it, right? But it's almost like a marketing scheme for it. It's true, it's not incorrect, but it's just comical to me. The other thing is, sometimes people will say things like natural or all natural, or, they can even say organic and not really be organic. Those little organic seals are what you have to look for to really be certified organic. Otherwise, they can just call it organic, even if it's not. So I think it's just kind of important to kind of be mindful as a consumer that things that are on the front of the package are not regulated. It's only that nutrition facts label and the ingredients list on the back that are in fact regulated and true. Supplements, it's even worse. Right. So the FDA monitors food, they monitor medications that are like synthetic compounds. So those are, over the counter medications, but also certainly all prescription drugs are monitored through the FDA. And honestly, a lot of times they are one and the same. So for example, things like Zantac for heartburn relief, or omeprazole, Advil, really any over-the-counter analgesic or like pain relief product, all of those actually started out as prescription drugs, and then they basically said, okay, it's pretty safe for people to use these without a prescription and lower the dose at which it's sold over the counter. So a lot of those things have been around for a long time and actually have been pretty heavily regulated for quite some time. That said, they regulate they have to have a certain, they have to disclose the drug facts. So they have to have, the active ingredient as well as the inactive ingredients. Again, because you can have, there's something that they put in it to form it into like a gel as opposed to a capsule. You may not tolerate something that's in that gel product, even though you can tolerate the active ingredient. So they have to give you a list of ingredients, and they also have to tell you how much there is, and as well as like, recommended dosing and things like that. And all of that is regulated by the FDA as well. Supplements, because they are neither food nor are they drugs, are not regulated at all. They don't fall under any jurisdiction with the FDA, because the argument is that, well, they're derivatives of food. Those foods are generally considered safe, so therefore the supplements have to be safe. And actually, that's not right. As we've known, I think vitamin C is probably the most prominent example that people are familiar with. But, just because, the amount of vitamin D that you would eat in an egg, or we'll go with vitamin C. Vitamin C is kind of the more linear example. So if you eat an orange, that's probably anywhere from like 300 to 500 milligrams of vitamin C, depending on how big your orange is, right? Perfectly acceptable dose of vitamin C, tolerated very well by most people. If you buy the vitamin C packets that are kind of like, emergency or airborne or any of those, you can see that they have upwards of 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C per dose. And, a lot of times people think, well, whatever, that's extra. If I don't use it, I'll just pee it out. And yeah, that's true sometimes. But the problem is all of our vitamins have an upper limit or a toxic limit. So, an upper limit is basically a point at which your body can absorb no more. And a toxic limit is a point at which it starts to actually have adverse effects on your body. So an upper limit is less dangerous just because that means that like your body can't absorb it, you're going to pee it out, but it's not necessarily causing problems. A toxic limit means that it is creating some problems. And so for most things the upper limit is lower than the toxic limit, right? Because the toxic limit is typically quite high, and the toxic limit is typically an amount that you would never get eating food, or food like you would have to eat 4 oranges in a day to get anywhere near the amount of vitamin C that's considered toxic, right? So the toxic limit for vitamin C is about 2,000 milligrams per day. And honestly, if you're taking those emergency packets like you're supposed to, which is every like 4 hours, you're well above that toxic limit. Now, is it going to cause like a brain aneurysm and a stroke, and like you're going to have like anaphylaxis and die? No. The most common problem is GI symptoms: heartburn, indigestion, sometimes diarrhea. Really nothing that's horrible, but it's important to note that some of those, the supplement products, are not far off from the toxic limit. And really, if it's enough to be toxic, it's not doing your body any good. So I just think that's kind of one key example. There certainly are others, but I think it's kind of important to note that just because vitamin D in fish or eggs or whatever is good for you doesn't mean that a boatload of vitamin D from a supplement is better. I think that's really important to note. The other thing that supplements don't have to do is they don't have to claim ingredients, and they don't have to claim efficacy. So if a supplement contains a vitamin or mineral that has what's called a recommended daily amount, or an RDA, they do have to put that. So for example, vitamin A, C, E, all of those kinds of things, they do have to label how much, that they have it in and how much they have. Any other like inactive ingredients, any other plant extracts that don't contain vitamins and minerals, they don't have to claim it. So basically, if you think of like your vitamins with like letter names, so like ABC, DEK, things like that, potassium, sodium, stuff like that, even cholesterol and fat, if that's relevant, they have to contain those things, but they don't have to contain anything else. So I think it's just really important to, or calories, if they contain calories, they have to list that, but they don't have to list the actual inactive ingredients. So for one, if you're coming in with, say, a gluten allergy, super, super common, supplements can be very, very dangerous for you because they don't have to claim that they contain a wheat product. And just because you read the label and don't see anything about wheat on there, you're like, oh, okay, this is safe for me to take. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Wheat allergies and corn allergies, even soy allergies, can be really problematic for supplements because a lot of supplements contain those things and they don't have to claim that they do, and it can be problematic for you. Um, the other big thing, and this is kind of where I really sink my teeth in with this episode, is that they don't have to prove efficacy. So efficacy basically means that your medication or supplement or whatever it is actually produces a desired health effect. So it basically means that it does what it says it does. Supplements don't have to prove that. Medications absolutely do. Whether they are over the counter medications, prescription medications, the FDA regulates that out the wazoo. They sink drug companies sink billions of dollars a year into clinical trials that basically says, without a shadow of a doubt, this drug is both safe for people to take and it is effective in doing what it's supposed to be doing. And in some cases, they have to prove that it's more effective than the first line of treatment that already has been shown to be effective. So I think, those things, yes, I think the pharmaceutical industry is corrupt. Yes, I think drugs are overpriced. And they do spend copious amounts of money developing medications that actually never make it to market because they fail those trials. They aren't effective enough, or they're not safe enough. And the FDA just nixes the entire project, and the billions of dollars that the drug company has spent are just lost. So again, I'm not defending the pharmaceutical industry. You will not hear me say it. That said, that does still happen. But I think it's really important to remember that supplement companies don't have to do that. So for example, a weight loss supplement, like I'm just going to use hydroxycut, right? They don't have to do clinical trials to show that their product produces weight loss. They don't have to do clinical trials that prove that their product is safe. And they have actually gotten in trouble. That's why I picked hydroxycut, because they found that their products actually had adverse health effects. And it's really interesting when that happens because there's no regulating body. The FDA can't do anything about it. They were just lawsuits, personal lawsuits that were filed that kind of, got them in hot water and then eventually word spread. But basically, there's no data for us as health practitioners to rely on. There's no there's no clinical trials. A lot of times supplement companies, at least better supplement companies, will do their own clinical trials, but the quality of those clinical trials and the conclusions you can draw from them are really not that strong. So just to kind of give a frame of reference, most clinical trials for like, prescription drugs honestly have, tens of thousands of people in them, at least 5,000 people. Like that drug has gone into at least 5,000 people to show that it's safe, and at least 3 to 4,000 people to show that it is effective at what it claims to do. For reference, supplement companies may do a sample of like 150 people or so, most of whom work for the supplement company. So you talk to me about, confirmation bias and things like that. Is that data really valid? It's hard to say. A lot of times, okay, yeah, we took a group of people, we gave them the supplement, and then like their blood sugar was lower at the end of the trial than it was in the beginning, but they don't have a control group. So we don't know if their blood sugar was lower just because they were paying attention to what they were eating and like they knew it was going to be measured. So they started doing things differently, or because it was just the supplement, right? If you don't have a control group, you can't really draw any conclusions about the intervention. The other thing is that, those results, like, yeah, it was lower, but was it clinically meaningful? A lot of times it's not. If they publish the data, which a lot of times they don't, a lot of times it's just kind of like, this is garbage. Like, this is literally laughable data. Which, it's not to say that it's worthless in the sense of like, yeah, that's a great pilot study, but it's not anything I'm going to stake my license on making recommendations about, because there's just not enough of it there. So I think that, that's important. I will say that things like, for example, vitamin D and calcium and bone health, for example, those kind of well-established trends, a lot of those actually have been done in larger clinical trials. So again, that's where working with a dietitian, or even, your healthcare provider should have a good handle on that. Of kind of what data is available. So some of those they have done larger clinical trials. The government, or whatever healthcare agency has funded it, and there is more data available, but that's not all of them. Generally speaking, that exists for things that are like isolated nutrients. So things like vitamin C and immune health, vitamin D and bone health, things like that. And certainly if you have a deficiency of any of those things, so a lot of time, we know that taking vitamin D when you have a deficiency in vitamin D is beneficial. Same goes for something like iron. A lot of those things, they are a little bit more well established. That said, any supplement that is claiming in and of itself to produce a health effect, so something that's claiming to produce weight loss, something that's claiming to improve gut health, something that's claiming to reduce cholesterol, or claiming to lower your blood pressure or whatever, without really like getting into specific nutrients that it contains, likely is going to be bullshit. I won't say always, but likely. And again, kind of going to your health professionals, who have read the research forwards and backwards. Definitely dietitians are going to be the experts in that field, but most of primary care doctors and things like that, they get to ask those questions often enough that they're up on the research. And if they don't know the answer, they should be able to tell you like, hey, I don't know, let me ask the dietitian and get back to you, because they or look into it and read their research and get back to you you with a more solid answer. Um, I definitely a health professional is the way to go, because frankly, trying to read on Google, you're never going to really find the truth. And certainly, reading labels or internet reviews or things like that, you're just there's not going to be any valid data out there for you to draw conclusions from. You can certainly do your own research so long as that research is scholarly articles. So scholarly research is research that is funded by a neutral agency, meaning not the supplement company, and it is peer reviewed, which means that other scientists who are not affiliated with the company who produce the supplement have read it, kind of agree with the results. They, kind of have critiqued it every which way. And even at that, kind of be careful because there's a lot of nuance in study design and kind of what you can draw from certain types of studies. But if you feel comfortable reading that research, places like PubMed, Google Scholar, et cetera, those are good places to find it rather than just like, typing it into Google itself, because you're going to find, twice as many ads that or links that are sponsored by supplement companies than you are actually peer reviewed literature. So that is my little soapbox informatics about supplements. If you guys have questions, like I said, about specific supplements, by all means leave them in the comments. I would love nothing more than to dig into kind of key questions about them. And also if you have questions kind of about regulation or kind of, what's regulated, what's not, anything like that, by all means, leave me questions, comments, things like that. I would love to hear more from you. So with that, I will leave you. And again, if you are really curious as to kind of how this pertains to your health personally, and kind of, you've got, maybe you're managing several chronic diseases and you've tried some of these supplements and you're kind of not quite sure what to do or where to go from here, and you just kind of want to get your questions answered, book a discovery call. It's available on our website. I'll link it in the show notes below. But basically, it's 15 minutes. We sit down. It's free of charge. There's no cost. And we kind of just talk about, what are your goals? What are your questions? Are they something that we can help you with? And, if not, then we kind of send you on your way. And really what we do, we send you in a way, but we point you in the right direction. We kind of give you the name and numbers of people who can help you if we can't. And if we feel like, yeah, this is right up our alley, this is within our scope of practice, we are able to certainly help you with this further, and this is what that would look like. And then you have the option to book one-on-one counseling. So it's a very no pressure, no stakes, no strings attached way to kind of get in, talk to us about your questions, and see if this is really the right place for you to be or not. So I definitely encourage you to do that. Again, I will link all of that in the show notes below. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. I will see you next time.